Hey, what's going on, my Auburn friends? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com. Happy Monday to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this edition of SEC Insider presented by Milo's. Our good friends at Milo's have been with us for these last several weeks that we provided our draft coverage. And now the 2021 NFL draft is in the books. And we've got Tom Green here to talk about it. Several Auburn guys going off the board. And I just kind of want to dig a little deeper on some of those and where they landed and what the expectations are. And we'll kind of go down the list, and we'll start with Anthony Schwartz, first Auburn player in the 2021 draft to get picked up, third round, 91st pick. They get flash. Just the excitement around that and why. There's no surprise really that he's the first Auburn player off the board. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people probably expected him to be the first or the second guy off the board, really depending on which mock drafts you're looking at. But, obviously, he's a very talented receiver who, just hasn't quite, scratched the surface of what he's able to do. He's been a guy that's focused at two sports, both track and football. He's obviously got just game-changing speed. Really interested to see how the Browns will use him in that wide receiving core that already has Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry in there. I think he's one of those guys that could really open things up and stretch the field both horizontally and vertically for them.
Yeah, and I love what you said about that. I think he really is only scratching the surface and a lot left to be desired. And I know the ceiling can certainly be high for him. So we'll be exciting to see how things turn out there. Selected as the next Auburn player, fifth round to the Jets, Jamie Sherrod. What are the Jets getting in him as a safety?
I think the Jets got to steal with Jamie Sherrod in the fifth round. He's consistent for one. I think Kevin Steele said back in September, he's probably the most technically sound tackler that he's ever been around as a defensive back, which is really saying something because Kevin Steele's been coaching for 30, 40 years, however long it has been. Jamie Sherrod was just a really instinctive player. He's not afraid to get in a guy's face and is unflinching when a ball carrier is coming at him. What's really interesting, I think, is the Jets, when they announced him on their Twitter feed, they announced him as a linebacker, even though he played safety at Auburn. He's one of those guys that could either be a box safety or a weak side linebacker. I know a lot of teams were looking at him at either of those positions. I think he'll do well in that 3-4 defense as a weak side linebacker. I think the Jets really got a steal there in the fifth round.
And also going in the fifth round, a linebacker, KJ Britt, going to the Tampa Bay Bucs. Interesting pick there. And, coming off an injury, obviously had that surgery, earlier in the season and was unable to finish out the season at Auburn. Just your overall thoughts on what they're getting in KJ Britt. And are you surprised by where he ended up going in the fifth round?
I think everybody was surprised, including KJ himself. I think you look at most mock drafts, they had him going, probably as a seventh round guy. He's always been really sound against the run. His nickname has always been Downhill Britt just because of how physical and instinctive he is playing against the run. There's some questions about how he can drop back into coverage. I think he showed a little bit of that ability at the Senior Bowl back in January. So I think he answered some of those questions, which may have helped his value climb up the board. But I think that's a pretty interesting fit for Tampa. It seems they've got a pipeline of Auburn guys going there. 3 straight years they've drafted an Auburn defensive guy. Jamel Dean a couple years ago, Carlton Davis last year, now KJ Britt. So they've clearly got a little pipeline for Auburn defensive players over there.
Yeah, no doubt. And the last one to go in the NFL draft of this year, Seth Williams, sixth overall, or in the sixth round, to the Denver Broncos. Just your thoughts on his abilities and what he can do at the next level.
Well, I think Seth slipping to the sixth round was a little bit of a surprise to people, too. I think most mock drafts had him anywhere from the third to the fifth round. I think really, there's some questions about his consistency. There's no doubt about his ability. It's just a matter of whether he can do it on a consistent basis. I know some of the draft analysts were talking about, he had some troubles with some drops on deep balls. But really, you're looking at a guy who, was a major contributor for all 3 years at Auburn. He was the Tigers' leading receiver the last 2 years. He finished in the top 10 in program history in receptions, yards, and touchdown catches. He's got 3 game-winning touchdowns on his resume. And as a freshman, even though he didn't lead the team in receiving, I believe he led the SEC in yards per catch. So he's clearly got some ability. He's really good at high-pointing the jump balls and just going up there and grabbing it himself. But again, I think it's just a consistency thing that may have resulted in his slide a little bit. But I think that's a good fit where he's ending up there in Denver. Quite a receiving core they got there between him, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, some other guys. Just interesting to see how their quarterback situation will work out with all those receivers.
Yeah, definitely. Got to get the ball to those guys. And then I want to get into, I guess, the 2 guys so far have gone undrafted free agent, Eli Stove, Jordan Peters. Kind of what's the expectations for those guys at the next level? I don't know that, I know that they were kind of on the bubble of potentially being drafted, but I think by all accounts, most people expected them to go undrafted free agent. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the key for both those guys and being able to make an NFL roster is going to be their contributions on special teams, which they're both very capable of doing and willing. Eli, obviously a very versatile receiver. He's just been very consistent throughout his career. If he can make an impact on special teams in camp and preseason, I think he'll impress the Chargers. As for Jordan Peters, getting a chance to reunite with Jamie and Sherwood up there with the Jets. But, you talk about special teams. Jordan Peters made a name for himself at Auburn by being just this special teams wizard. Finished with 5 career blocked kicks, which is just impressive. He's just got a knack for coming off the edge there and on special teams. And, if he can showcase that sort of ability, I think he has a really good chance of sticking with the Jets.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And before we jump into one final topic, I do want to mention to everyone, make sure you go check out Road to the Pros, Anthony Schwartz, featured in that. And just a tremendous athlete and just tremendous person all around. And that was something that was produced by Wes Steiner. Great series, and we'll be dropping the last episode coming up, I think, later this week. But right now we've got the first 3 episodes, gives you a look behind the curtain to get to know Anthony Schwartz and, what the NFL will be getting in him as a player and as a person. Lastly, I do want to bring up to you, you posted an article on AL.com, I guess over the weekend, was it, that you posted this article?
Yeah, I think it was Friday.
Just talking about the NFL draft. And obviously, Auburn didn't end up having anyone go in the NFL draft. It was a 3rd round that Anthony Schwartz was the first one taken off the board. But you bring up a good point about Coach Harsin and his eye for the quarterback and making a correlation there. I'm going to kind of let you break that down and sort of what brought you to bring this perspective or lens, which I think is very intriguing and very interesting. I think Auburn fans will find it the same.
Yeah, obviously, Bryan Harsin didn't coach either Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, but these are 2 guys that went 2nd and 3rd overall. Bryan Harsin's ability to develop quarterbacks has been pretty well documented from his time at Boise State, whether it was Jared Zabransky, Kellen Moore, Hank Bachmeier, obviously, Brett Ripien, those guys. But I think it says something about Bryan Harsin's eye for quarterback talent when you look at the recruitment of both Trey Lance and Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson was a longtime Boise State commit. He was committed there for about 6 months. He got Bryan Harsin just doesn't hand out offers to quarterbacks, left and right. He was familiar with Zach Wilson's tape. Zach Wilson was there for a camp one weekend, and Harsin put him through the ringer. Still one of the most impressive workout performances that I was told Harsin has seen from a quarterback prospect. And, he was just really impressed with his poise, his arm strength, thought that there was a lot of potential there with just, his frame and his skill set. Just thought he needed to put on some more weight and get in the weight room. The next day, they called and offered him a scholarship. He committed like a day or 2 later after that. And he was all Boise State for about 6 months. And then, late in the recruiting cycle kind of backed off after he got some other offers from BYU. He's a guy who's from Utah. His dad played at Utah. So he wanted to be closer to home, wound up at BYU. But that kind of forced Boise State late in the recruiting cycle to kind of turn to a second option. They got back from the coaching staff got back from their Las Vegas Bowl victory against Oregon that year, and immediately went to their big board to see what quarterbacks were available, and name that shot to the top of that list was Trey Lance. He'd been committed to North Dakota State, which is obviously an FCS program, but they saw a lot of the same things in Lance that they saw in Zach Wilson. So they extended him an offer, gauged his interest. But ultimately, he didn't want to go back on his word to North Dakota State. But you're talking about a guy who, Trey Lance didn't really have any FBS offers, and some of the FBS teams that were interested in him wanted him as a defensive back. And now you're looking at him at number 3 pick. Obviously, Bryan Harsin saw something in him and Zach Wilson early on to see their potential. Obviously, he didn't sign those guys. That's something that he's going to need to do at Auburn. But I think fans should feel pretty confident in his ability to identify potential in quarterbacks and then develop them once he gets them on campus, as we've seen with the other guys that he had at Boise State. Yeah,
no doubt about it, Tom. And I love the perspective on that. And I think it's really cool to just sort of see his progression, and it should give Auburn fans something to be excited about. And I know, Bo Nix still has a lot of development and things to do, but I know there's some positive things that came out of spring and, just kind of figuring that out, and obviously figuring out who the backup quarterback's going to be. And, still a lot of work to do, but, I think Bryan Harsin will definitely get the job done, and a lot of excitement to look forward to as we enter into the fall and, in the years to come, under the new head coach at Auburn. So, again, we appreciate you as always, and we appreciate our sponsor, Milo's, for hanging out with us and for, giving us free things. We love Milo's for free things, right? Download the mobile app for a free original cheeseburger after your first order. Thanks for watching.